Depending on when you're watching this lecture video, good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Today we're going to be talking about the pastoral epistles. But first, let's talk about a characteristic of what a pastor is. So, what's a pastor and what's a characteristic of him? We're not going to go into detail of this, but there is one thing I want you to know, and that is that a pastor has authority. So, what's one difference between a pastor and a regular person? Authority. The pastor has authority. The regular person, the layman, does not. Okay? The pastor actually has authority over his church. Imagine that. So let's, with that assumption in mind, that there's actually a difference in authority. Like the pastor can actually tell his congregants what to do. That's actually like a father has authority over his son. A pastor has authority over his congregant. That is not an exaggeration, okay? So let's talk about now the pastoral epistles with this assumption in mind, that pastors have authority. The pastoral epistles, what's special about them? It's that they're written to pastors. Imagine that. This is the one thing I want you to know about the pastoral epistles. Pretty easy to remember. The audience is a specific pastor. That brings us to the next question. Does this category of books, do the pastoral epistles apply to you when you're reading your Bible in the morning for devotions, when you're out on the mountain memorizing 2 Timothy? Do the words you're reading, do those apply to you? Do the commands in those epistles apply to you? Well, are you a pastor? No. Then I'm sorry. A lot of the stuff in these books is not going to apply to you. Now, can we get some general good principles from it? Yes, of course. But most of the stuff is going to apply to the person who's a pastor, to the person who's in the authority of their church. Okay, let's bring this to a specific example of a classic Christian verse nowadays that is often quoted. And that's going to be 1 Timothy 4:12, which says, "Don't let anyone look down on you because of your youth or because you are young." I'm writing from top left to bottom right. I guess that's how we're doing it. So, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young. Does this apply to you? First of all, before we want to figure out if it applies to you or not, let's figure out actually what Paul is saying. So who is Paul talking to directly in his letter? Good, he's talking to Timothy. And so if he's writing to Timothy, then he's obviously telling Timothy something specific about probably the church that he's leading. And so what he's probably saying is, there's probably someone, let's say this 55-year-old Christian, but you only have, 24-year-old Pastor Timothy. Is the 55-year-old Christian in authority over the 24-year-old pastor? No, he's not. Actually, the 24-year-old pastor has authority in the church over the 55-year-old. Okay? And this is what Paul is saying. He's saying there could be people who look down on you because you're a young pastor. Don't let them do this. You are in authority, Timothy. Make sure they understand that. Now, let's take it to another example. Let's say you have a 55-year-old Christian and you have a 24-year-old non-pastor, so we'll say Christian, or church member or congregant. Then does it apply to this situation? Let's see. This guy is reading it and he sees, don't let anyone look down on you because you're young. Well, 55-year-old Christian is telling 24-year-old Christian how to act. So put yourself in these shoes. If someone's looking down on you as a lesser authority because you're young, is that okay? The most important things to remember that there's a difference between a pastor and a non-pastor. There's that authority. There's also a difference between letters that are written to different audiences. In this case, some are written to churches. In pastoral epistles, they're written to a specific pastor, and they generally apply to all pastors. Okay, thanks for listening. Have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening. See ya. Oh my goodness, that is I lost my spot. Okay, there. 412. Kobe. Seriously. Don't look down at me because I'm young. When I dress like a thug, drinking milk out of a big jug. Couldn't give me a hug, but stay 6 feet away. It's not fair to do that to May, but I know that you are crazy. But I like you anyway. Pastoral letters rap. I got my cool shades, and you're gonna throw the shade. I'm gonna close the shade. Stop with the shades.